And today I've got a little light history from the American Revolutionary era to kick off your weekend early. I'm talking about a guy that some people, some historians, consider the first real president, the real first president of the United States instead of George Washington. That's Samuel Huntington of Connecticut. He was a signer of the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation. So on this episode, I'm going to share some highlights from his life. I'm going to explain why some people call him the first president. And then I'm going to give what I think, I actually agree with this example or this reason why that name is incorrect. You may agree, you may not, but I think it's pretty interesting. But first of all, before getting to that, my name is Michael Bolden. We broadcast live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time from here in my home office and studio in downtown Los Angeles for the 10th Amendment Center. Our show homepage has everything you need to follow this program, all the archives. On individual episodes, I'll include a bunch of links and references so you can read and learn more on your own time. You can find all the different platforms, both video and audio-only podcast edition, and even our membership program where you can put your financial faith behind our work for as little as $2 a month. And we make it go a long, long way in support of the Constitution and liberty. That show homepage is 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. It's all spelled out, 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. And I couldn't be more grateful for you spending some of your time with me today. Thank you so much for being here. Whether this is your first episode or you've been here for every single one since day one, thank you. But since it's Fast Friday, I promise to not take up too much of your time. Let's see if I can get this info out to you in the next 10 to 15 minutes-ish. And I want to start out, and let me pull up a picture for you guys watching with this guy. This is Samuel Huntington, who was born today in history, July 16th, 1731, in an area that's now known as Scotland, Connecticut. I'd never heard of it before. Yesterday, as I was putting together my notes for this is a town of less than 2,000, maybe even 1,800 people today. And his life, Samuel Huntington's life, is really an American success story, even though most people have never heard his name today. I mean, maybe they recognize the name Huntington, but it's really a rags to riches. That may be a pure one, because he didn't come from complete and abject poverty, but his family was not well off by any means, and he rose to some level of fame, at least at the time. And then, of course, he also rose to a level of wealth over the years as well. Here from descendants of the signers of the Declaration of Independence website, they put it this way: young Samuel did not acquire a formal education except that provided by the common school. So he really was just given a very, very basic education. He was part of a family of 10 kids, and 3 of them were sent to college. And I'm not sure if they just didn't think he was capable or they just couldn't afford to send a 4th to college. But that kind of gives you a little bit of idea. So he took it upon himself, even though he was working on the farm. He was apprenticed to a cooper, which I think chickens, I'm just guessing. But he was very interested in learning. Abigail Adams, many years later, wrote to her son, John Quincy, that learning is not attained by chance. You have to actually search it out. And that's what Samuel Huntington did as a 16-year-old kid. I mean, you think of a 16-year-old today, there aren't many that are out there that are hungry to learn about history and law and Latin and things like that. So he borrowed books from the library of the Reverend Ebenezer Devotion and from local lawyers and began to study history, Latin, and law. He was admitted to the bar at Windham in 1754 at age 23. So he learned quite a bit, and he proved that he knew what he was talking about. Now I want to fast forward. He was a member of the Second Continental Congress. He was given a lot of respect. He earned a lot of respect from people in Connecticut. And while not known, this is from Wikipedia, while not known for extensive learning or brilliant speech, extensive in comparison to people who went to Yale, for example, but he certainly was well studied. He just did it on his own. Huntington's steady hard work, they say, and unfailing calm manner earned him the respect of his fellow delegates. As a result, when John Jay left to become minister to Spain, Huntington was elected to succeed him as president of the Continental Congress on September 28th, 1779. So you had to have a lot of respect to actually have the Continental Congress choose you as the head person. He was reelected. I don't think he actually wanted to be reelected, but they did anyway, and he just did his duty. Anyways, he was still in office in March of 1781. He was in office in March of 1781, and you may be familiar with the fact that that's when the Articles of Confederation were finally ratified by all the states and then went into effect. I think it was March 1st, 1781. And the title at the time of his job title went to President of the Congress of the Confederation. Now, since the Articles of Confederation was really the first constitution for the United States, and he was kind of de facto president of the Congress at that point and just kind of assumed the role under the Articles of Confederation. Some people will say, technically, he's really the first president of the United States. I'm going to get back to that a little bit more near the end of the show. But he actually resigned from that office just months later in July of 1781. He had some ill health. They tried to bring him back. I think it's 1782. He said he still wasn't ready. He did come back for the Treaty of Paris. And anyways, a little bit more on his life. I want to go to the Connecticut chapter or the Society of the Sons of the American Revolution. And here's how they put it. This is earlier on in his Revolutionary era life. A man of cautious, reticent, and conservative temperament, he nevertheless joined the Sons of Liberty in opposition to the Stamp Act, although he was hesitant about further strong protests. So he was kind of moderate in how he wanted to go after this, but he still recognized that the Stamp Act was a threat to liberty, and he joined the Sons of Liberty. So even among the Sons of Liberty, there were more radical kind of elements or radical groups in Boston, New York, and even some in Connecticut and Rhode Island. And then some of the people didn't want to do as much. It wasn't just some unanimous blob of people, one mentality. And he was kind of a moderate middle ground kind of guy. But they write the passage of the coercive acts in 1774 to protest the Boston Tea Party brought many moderates, including Huntington, into a more active role. And if we think about that and try to apply today, a lot of times we look at what we live under right now, and that's the largest government in the history of the world, and it's pretty easy to get down. Like every time they do something, it's bad. It affects lives, liberties, and property. It affects our rights. It kills people so often. The empire is pretty evil. But on the kind of silver lining point of view is every time they go further, they go further, they go further. And in fact, the British Empire certainly did this. They went too far, and it brought enough people on board to say, you know, enough is enough. And to me, that's a little bit of a silver lining, because even a moderate guy, a cautious, conservative temperament kind of guy like Samuel Huntington, by 1774, he was pushed so far that he started playing a more active role. And here from the Museum of Connecticut History, they give some highlights. A well-attended meeting in Norwich, I'm apologizing if I got that name wrong, in June of 1774, chose a committee of 9 to draw up a resolution regarding, quote, this alarming crisis of affairs relative to the natural rights and privileges of the people. Always about natural rights back in the 1770s. Huntington's name came first on that list, and the resulting resolution passed almost unanimously, pledged that the inhabitants there would defend the liberties and immunities of British America and would cooperate with the other colonies in doing so. A little more, in 1775, in May, he moderated a meeting that instructed the selectmen and committee of inspection to take care that, get this is amazing, kind of a cancel culture approach back then, that no one, quote, inimical to the common cause of America be allowed to settle in town. They were just saying, look, if you aren't one of the patriots, if you're with them, we don't even want you around here. Now, it was a small town. It was probably a little easier to do that, but they were pretty radical about this. And he was the chair of that committee meeting. And then in October of 75, he was chosen as one of Connecticut's delegates to the Continental Congress, Second Continental Congress, and began serving in January 76. And there in Philadelphia, that's where he really kind of began his national level work. Here again from the Descendants website, he was present on June 7th, 1776. And I did an episode on this in June discussing the ramp up to the Declaration of Independence. That was the day that Richard Henry Lee proposed a resolution that, quote, these colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. So he was there for that. They tabled the debate on this. There was some opposition as to when they should actually do this kind of thing. And they came back on July 2nd And then Huntington voted for the resolution and then also for the language in the Declaration on July 4th. And he was one of the signers. He signed the engrossed copy of the Declaration on August 2nd, 1776. And get this, so he ends up becoming president of the Second Continental Congress, and he's in office when the Articles of Confederation go into effect. And so he's the guy that does the official communication to the 13 states. This is March 2nd, 1781. Oh, I should pull this up on the screen. So you guys, I'm going through this whole episode and I'm not showing this stuff on the screen. Anyways, March 2nd, 1781, he wrote to each of the 13 states as follows, quote, "By the act of Congress herewith enclosed, your excellency will be informed that the Articles of Confederation and perpetual union between the 13 United States are formally and finally ratified by all the states. We are happy to congratulate our constituents on this important event, desired by our friends, but dreaded by our enemies." So he's the guy that went down in history as the guy who notified all this. I'm sure everyone knew what was going on because it took a long time to get everyone on board and ratifying, but he did the official communication. And they go further and say Samuel Huntington, who was the 5th president of the Continental Congress, was allowed to continue in the new office with a new title, First President of the United States in Congress assembled under the Articles of Confederation. Now, a lot of people call him, because of that, they'll either suggest or hint that maybe he was the first real president, the real first president. Here, even on the official Connecticut Judicial Branch website of today, they, the highlight on his, or the title of this page is Samuel Huntington, the first president of the United States, ? So it's not like they're just totally, maybe I haven't read the whole document here, but, they're suggesting that maybe that he's the guy. Here at the New England Historical Society, they point out that some historians argue he was the first president of the United States because he was president of the Continental Congress when the Articles of Confederation were ratified on March 1st, 1781, and that document created the new republic. And then here again, from the Sons of the American Revolution, they don't hold back at all. The Connecticut chapter here, while he was president, is that a chapter? The Society, Connecticut Society. While he was president in 1781, the Articles of Confederation went into effect, thus making him the first president of the United States. Now, I disagree with that, and I'm going to I'll explain a little bit why. Here, and the best kind of easiest explanation comes from Wikipedia. You can find other explanations on this as well. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't, but check this out. The president of Congress was, by design, a position with little authority. The Continental Congress, fearing concentrating political power in an individual, gave their presiding officer even less responsibility than the speakers in the lower houses of the colonial assemblies. The president could not meet privately with foreign leaders. Such meetings were held with committees or the entire Congress. So Congress was really in charge. This is a guy to preside over meetings, to kind of make sure things were kind of neutral and the debates went forward. Or if you've ever seen like a political party event, this was kind of the presiding officer of those meetings. They go further and say the presidency was largely a ceremonial position. There was no salary. The primary role of the office was to preside over meetings of Congress, which entailed serving as an impartial moderator during debate. So you had to have a very impartial mentality. Maybe he earned the respect of being a guy that they could trust. And that's why they said, you know what, you're elected. Even though you don't want to do it, we're going to elect you again, and you can serve another year or so. The president, they write, was also responsible for dealing with a large amount of official correspondence. But he couldn't even answer any letter without being instructed to do so by Congress. So here's the president of the Continental Congress can't even reply to a letter sent to the president or to the Congress without approval from Congress in the first place. Presidents also signed, but did not write Congress's official documents. These limitations could be frustrating because a delegate essentially declined in influence when he was elected president. John Hancock, for example, was actually elected, I guess he was technically elected. I think it was like 1785 for a second time. He had served earlier on. He was elected a second time for a second term And he never even showed up. He never took a seat. He wasn't part of the Continental Congress at that time. He cited poor health, but it's possible, knowing Hancock's kind of views and approach to things, maybe he just wasn't interested because of this. Anyways, here's historian Edmund Burnett. This is 1940s historian. He put it this way: the presidents of Congress were almost solely presiding officers, possessing scarcely a shred of executive or administrative functions, whereas the President of the United States today is almost solely an executive officer with no presiding duties at all. There's almost totally opposite on their functions. Barring a likeness in social and diplomatic precedents, the two offices are identical only in the possession of the same title, of the word president. That's really it, because the way they functioned are nowhere close to each other. And here's another interesting piece over at Wiki, based on using this kind of changing approach, all these different, based on looking at like this, there are a lot of different versions of who you could call the first president of the United States then. This would include, they write, Peyton Randolph as president of the First Continental Congress, John Hancock as president when the Declaration was signed, Samuel Huntington as president when the Articles were ratified and took effect, Thomas McKean as the first president elected under the Articles, and then John Hanson as the first president under the Articles to serve the prescribed one-year term. So I'm going to just go with George Washington. I think it is very interesting history. I think it's very important for us to look back on the time of the Articles of Confederation, because so much of that informed the debates in Philadelphia, the structure of the Constitution that was sent to the states for ratification, and the debates in the state ratifying conventions. And I think constituting America.org has a great summary to close this out. And they put it this way: during his time, this signer of the Declaration of Independence was so highly regarded. Remember, he never got a formal degree, but yet he was awarded honorary degrees from Princeton, Dartmouth, and Yale. Additionally, his acquaintances included George Washington, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin. That's impressive for any man, let alone one who was self-educated and began life as a farmer. A man like that deserves to be remembered by us today. Well, I hope you guys found this interesting. I hope it was educational. More important than anything, I hope you learned something. If you enjoyed the show, you like our work at the TAC, please consider helping us spread the word. The easiest, freest way to do that is just to do a couple of clicks, like smashing a like button on any other platform that has a like button, sharing. You can also leave a review on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast platform, all that kind of stuff. What it does is it triggers the algorithm of the mainstream platforms, and it tells that platform to show the program to more people. And I'll tell you what, all the stuff that people have been doing, the reviews and stuff like that, that really, really helps out a great deal. And as I mentioned right at the outset, if you want to put your financial faith behind our work, please don't feel any obligation to do that. But if you're able to, I hope you'll consider it. It starts out as little as $2 a month to become a member of the TAC over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Again, that's all spelled out, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Again, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you have a great weekend. I really appreciate you being here with me today, and I'll see you next week here on the path to liberty.